So thank you for the nice introduction, John. So me, who am I? I am one of you. So let me just go through. I am a daughter. My parents, I forget the representative's name who was here earlier, who said her parents were still married 60-something year. My parents are 93 years old, still together, be 67 years this year. I don't come from a divorced household. Doesn't mean that's anything good or bad, but I just need you to understand my platform. I am a sister. I am an educated person, and my education was the one thing that I was most grateful for in my divorce. I am a mother. I have a 27-year-old daughter, and I was divorced when she was 2. So I went through it even before her words. I am divorced, as I said, and then I was introduced to trauma. I had a pretty, I think, nice growing up. I have a lovely family. I'm very close to them. I really didn't know anybody divorced. I think I knew one person. Her name was Debbie in 6th grade, who I hung out with through high school too, but that was the only family I really knew who was divorced. So I don't have a reference, a framework to work from of what that was about. As John said earlier, I did work at the Cambridge District Attorney's Office. I was a victim witness advocate. I worked with victims of violence on Superior Court cases. And my partner, my husband at the time, was a state trooper in a PhD program at Northeastern. And I was happily on my way to law school, except this is where it gets tricky and I didn't quite get to law school. He did finish his PhD though. But I went to file for divorce. I told my husband at the time that I was going to use a woman we knew. I heard the word mediation. This is back in 1993. So I had heard the term mediation, and I thought we would just use one person, and that would be really nice. What ended up happening is I went to see Diane, an attorney we both knew. I got home, retrieved my daughter, who had been with a sitter, and I got a knock on the door a couple hours later, and I was served divorce papers. Not only was I served divorce papers, I was served basically a restraining order, because if I wanted to leave the state, I'm originally from Connecticut, I was living in Massachusetts, and if I wanted to leave the state, I could do so, but without my baby. That wasn't going to be happening. So the trauma of that still exists within me today. I don't think it's something you just move on from. I think it stays with you. It's just what you do with the trauma that matters. And just the other asides, I became a school teacher in the state of Connecticut. I taught 8th grade math for almost a decade in Waterbury. And I became a teacher because I was a single mother. I didn't become a teacher. I was actually, as I said earlier, I was on my way to law school. I became a teacher because it seemed the most logical thing to do so that I could raise my child. I then, when my child got older, went to Columbia. I got another master's, and I became a therapist, and I opened a private practice in Westport, which then has morphed into divorce mediation and life coaching. So that's me. That is what I burned this year. Those are my files from my divorce. And in May, 20 years later, I had finally let go because I have carried them everywhere I've moved. And I've been in 4 different homes. They have come with me, but they're done. I burned them this year, and I started at 8 o'clock in the evening so I could have a fire. I ended at 5:30 in the morning. But it felt really good to finally not have the weight of that, because I never knew when if he was going to come back and we'd have another issue. I always wanted to be prepared, and that is one heck of a size box. There's a lot of stuff in there. There you go. I'm showing that picture. I am on the left, but the little stool that you'll notice on the right was my girlfriend's house who I was at. She did a mediation. That's her mediated agreement. It's one little file. Like, it's just one binder. Mine was very litigious for a very short marriage. It never needed to be that way. I wish it never was. Probably isn't a day, it doesn't go by that I think, why couldn't that have been different? Which is probably why I do the work I do, because I think divorce can be kinder, because it's our children's childhood. They get one, and we're responsible for it. And so that is gone, and I'm grateful for that. What is divorce mediation? Divorce mediation is a type of alternative dispute resolution where a neutral third party, divorce mediator, such as myself, helps guide the parties towards a legally binding and enforceable divorce agreement that is fair and workable for both parties, rather than placing such important issues in the hands of an anonymous judge or attorneys. Attorneys, they're needed, but not when the parents can come together and have a conversation about how they would like to set up their family going forward. It's going to change. People aren't going to be living together, but no one knows those children and no one knows that party better than the two of them. And if you can find someone who's really good to help walk you through it, the better. Mediation only works if you really have two parties who want to come to the table. It's very difficult if you don't. I think divorce is an epidemic, or are we all desensitized? It's almost like, oh, another shooting. Oh, another divorce. Divorce used to be like, oh, you're getting divorced. Now it's like, you divorced, okay. Divorce in the tri-state area, on an average, is roughly $25,000. I'm in Westport, Connecticut, Fairfield County. That's on the low end. $25,000 is a retainer. That's a retainer, because it's set up to litigate. Divorce is the second most stressful event in someone's life, only next to death, like really more of an unexpected death, but next to death. It's the most traumatic experience someone can go through. And if you haven't been there, if you haven't gone through it, I find the people that are actually trying to help need some education and what that's really like for those parties going through. So Emily, what you were saying about just being educated, it's so necessary. I can't say enough about that. Divorce can leave long-term effects such as depression, which we've seen. Martin, you were talking about depression. Depression in our children. I was a former teacher. I can tell you what divorce does on children academically. But yeah, in the state of Connecticut, we'd like our test scores to be better. But really, we need to look at what our families are going through and what these children are coming to their job, their schooling, with. Financial devastation, more women end up being impoverished. That doesn't mean some men are not, but more women end up being impoverished. And when women are stressful in raising children in an impoverished environment, it obviously makes it more difficult for the children, which then makes it more difficult for the children to do what they need to do, which is go to school. Difficulty in relationships, depressions, I said that earlier, I'm sorry, depression, substance abuse. Divorce can affect our ability to live optimally because it weighs so heavy and we don't have the places to go to really get the help. Attorneys aren't schooled, they're not trained in mental health, which is why I don't understand a lot of times why we're doing guardian ad litems as attorneys when they don't have a mental health background to be able to help these families, not take children away from the other, but how to actually navigate the system so that we're bringing families together and not pitting them against each other. But I really believe you have to have mental health training in order to be able to make those assessments. Children, education, and divorce. Children exposed to unilateral divorce are less educated by adulthood. Again, I think that's the depression that can hit in. It can then not allow you to do the best you can in school to get your job done. Children have lower educational aspirations and test scores during the process of their parents' marital disruption. Children should be, almost really, schools should be aware of when children are getting in the middle of a divorce so that the schools can then take these kids and give them some assistance, because a lot of the parents don't take their children to therapy, or if they do, there's a problem with the child, my child's acting out, my child's substance abuse. But if you really look at what's going on in the family, if there's a divorce going on or the children are going back and forth or there's conflict or trauma, we're not dealing with that. We're just dealing with the issue. You put a Band-Aid on it, not really getting to the root of things for them. Children of divorced parents are also more likely to be held back a grade and have lower grade point averages. I have seen that. I have seen that with intact families that are completely dysfunctional and children not being able to thrive. Doesn't necessarily just mean divorce, but we really have to look at what's going on in children's lives. If we really want to look at what's going on with state testing scores, because it's all connected. Children's mental health with divorce. Children can suffer long-term effects from their parents' challenging divorce unless the parents are willing to sit with each other and do what's in the children's best interest, which is get their act together so that the children have a chance of being able to move forward with their own lives. Depression, trouble in school, trouble with the law, difficult relationships. The data is there. To ignore it, it doesn't even make sense. And for me, I would be more concerned with our state being concerned about the best interests of the child. This is not in the best interests of our children. And if we have close to a 50% divorce rate, that's an epidemic to me. If we had 50% of Connecticut residents having cancer, we'd be in an uproar. But we're not when it comes to family dynamics and how to strengthen families. What is the goal of divorce for our society? Mediation brings families together rather than continuing to tear them apart. Divorce is a $1 billion industry. $1 billion. Mediators make a fraction of what a litigated divorce will make. Thank goodness. Because mediators it's not about the money, it's about doing right by families. If you have a $1 billion industry at 50% and you have children struggling in school, I don't understand why this is not addressed. It's a no-brainer to me that there's something wrong with our court system, there's something wrong with our abilities to help and serve our families. The workers in the family services in the courts, I don't know what their training is about mediation. I know that courts are trying to implement more family services to be able to offer different mediation. But it's the training I'm really concerned about. Are they trained? Can we do more with our attorneys? We don't have to get rid of our attorneys or throw them under the bus, but do they need more mental health training? Should it be part of their continuing education units? I know they have CEUs just like everybody else, but do they need that mental health training to better assist families? So I don't know what the answer is. I can tell you that it's not working what we're doing, and I can see it in the schools, you can see it in the families, and you can see it with individuals, men and women, not being able to even text. I see it in people writing through these family wizard programs, and I'm like, well, maybe if we can teach people how to communicate, even not being so aggressive or assuming it's the worst when a text message comes through. But there's so much work to be done. I don't feel we're doing the best we can. And when it comes to these parenting classes that are being taught or required in Connecticut to have before you divorce, are they really meeting the needs of the families? I'm not sure. From what I hear, the data out there would say no. But that's just what I hear. So in terms of what our goal for divorce is, I'm not sure. I do my job trying to bring people together as best I can. It doesn't always work. But I do think we need more training and more people out there trying to bring families together rather than tearing them apart. And I think benefits. I'll just go over mediation and benefits. Increased control over people's outcomes. Improved communication, because you can actually, especially if you have a mediator who's also a trained mental health worker, you actually can teach people how to communicate because you have them right there. And you can see where it breaks down. You could see how someone took what someone said in a different way when that person didn't really mean it. You could teach them communication skills. It's less stressful. There's no way around the stress of divorce, but it is less stressful. It's also less expensive. It's quicker and more flexible. I do love that Connecticut still has that, for the most part, that 90-day window from when you file to when it can end. I love using that 90-day window to actually create the parenting plan so they can start living it and seeing how it works. So by the time they end up going for a divorce 3 months later, you can kind of tweak what doesn't work. and have it written down in a concrete form. So the first thing I do is the parenting plan. Finances can wait, but you can't use finances then to tweak the parenting plan. So when someone's mad at how the finances went, you don't want them to come back and say, well, now you're not having 50% of the kids, or your time's going to be less. It's child-centered. If you stick with the parenting plan as the very first thing you do in a mediation, that's what the most important thing is. It is those children. Not that finances aren't important, but if you can get down to how you both can be involved in the children's lives, that works out to a much better strategy. It's more peaceful. It is by no means always peaceful, but it is more peaceful because when voices get raised, you can have someone step out. You could have them talk about what's going on with them. And so you can try to help decompress that situation rather than they walk away angry having utilized their attorney and no one ever got to be heard or to communicate what they were thinking. Long-term continued amicability, which I think is our responsibility to the children in this state and in families, is to have long-term amicability. We need to have parents be able to get along as best they can. They do not have to be the best of friends. Doesn't hurt if it works out that way, but the more amicable they can be, the better childhood children will have, the better legacy these parents can leave behind for their families. And that's all I got for you.
Wow. That's great. Thank you, Colleen. It's so wonderful to hear your experiences, and if we need a whole lot more people like you. Do you know how to clone yourself? I have a CRISPR. I think that maybe Martin can help do some CRISPR on you.